All right, today we're going to talk about congruent polygons, focusing on first triangles and then leading our way into other figures. So the very first part is we have congruent triangles. And what that means is that we have corresponding sides and corresponding angles that are congruent. Simply meaning 3 angles are congruent, 3 sides are congruent to each other. Corresponding parts maps each part of a figure to a matching part of another figure. What that really is saying is corresponding parts are matching parts. One side of a triangle matches the other side of the second triangle. And we're going to see what that looks like in the following diagrams. So in our first example, it says, write a congruent statement for the triangle and identify all the parts of the congruent corresponding parts. Before I begin, order of letters matter. They are just like how you write your name, your first, middle, last. Order matters. So we have to be very specific. The way we start our first name of our first figure tells us how we have to follow for the second figure. All right, so the very first one is I'm going to start off with the congruency statement. So I'm going to say triangle, and we draw a triangle symbol for triangle. So triangle KJL. So again, I could have picked any order I wanted for my first triangle. I like to pick where I have the first curve marking. So since I picked the first curve marking, then I made my way to the third curve marking. You can see I went in this order. So I went from K to J. So I have the 1 curve marking, 1 tick mark, then that's 3 curve markings, and went my way down. So K, J, L. So in the next triangle, I'm going to start at the corresponding letter to K, meaning the letter S. S has 1 curve marking, so did K. They are matching angles. So now, which direction am I going to go? That depends on how I started my first name. Since I went from the first curve to the 3 curves, I'm going to do the same thing in the other triangle. So here I'm going to go from S to T and back up. So here my triangle is S, T, R. Again, this is called a congruency statement. Super important to know what that is called because you'll be asked to write them. And also they're going to be given to you so you have information provided from those statements. All right, so now it says to list the corresponding angles. So we're going to look for curve markings. So here I have angle K is congruent to angle S. Again, looking at the pictures, they both have 1 curve marking. Then I'm going to say angle L is congruent to angle R. Both have 2 curve markings. Making the last pair, angle J is congruent to angle T. Notice that I'm using my angle symbols and I'm also using uppercase letters. Now moving into corresponding sides. When we are naming sides, you need to make sure you have 2 letters when you name a side. So now we're going to start. I'm going to go in order of tick marks. So the very first tick mark I see on my first diagram is JK. And that's going to be congruent to, and now I'm going to look for the first tick mark here. So now I have to think, am I going to name it ST or TS? Again, order matters. So looking at J had 3 curve markings, so I need to start with that angle that had 3 curve markings. So this is going to be TS. And do not forget to put your symbol over your segments. All right, next one, we have LK. So LK had those 2 tick marks. I'm looking in the diagram for the next 2 tick marks, matching up our symbols. So we have RS. And then the last one, I have LJ, which is congruent to RT. All right, so I would like you to try to pause your screen and try the next example. Make sure you label your triangles before you start because all the letters are not there. And then unpause your screen and follow along to make sure you have the right answers. All right, so here we have triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. This is so important. It holds so much information. That is our congruency statement. So I'm going to label my triangle. So here is A, B, C. Doesn't matter. I just went around my triangle. And then here, D, E, F. Now, before I even go and complete this, I am going to fill in my diagram with curve markings and tick marks. So A is going to get one curve marking, and D is going to get one curve marking. They're both in the first position. B is going to get two curve markings. E is going to get two curve markings, making the third angle both getting three curve markings. All right, so now I'm going to actually write my corresponding angles because we already see them on our diagram. So here I have angle A is congruent to angle D. Angle B is congruent to angle E. Angle C is congruent to angle F. All right, so now I'm going to move into my segments. So going back to my statement, AB is the first two letters, making my first side. So I'm going to put one tick mark. Then BC comes next, getting two tick marks, making the third one AC, getting three tick marks. I'm going to do the same thing on the next triangle. So DE gets one tick mark, EF gets two, making the last one getting three. Now I can write my corresponding sides. Remember, order matters. So AB is congruent to DE. Then I can say BC is congruent to EF. And then CA is congruent to FD. All right, so that completes our entire problem. So now we're going to go and look at what happens when we are given a problem asking for more information with our congruency statement. So here is my congruency statement. What I would do first is mark my diagram. Now, what that means is I want you to mark angles and sides before you answer any of the questions. So now I'm going to mark my diagram. Curve markings first. So M gets one, K gets two, and L gets three. Do the same thing again. So J gets one, E gets two, and T gets three. Again, it's more about the statement than what the picture looks like because the letters can be in a different order. So pay attention to that statement. Now I'm going to go back and go and add my tick marks. So MK is getting one, KL is getting two, making the last one getting three. All right, in the next diagram, J is getting one, JE is getting one, ET is getting two, and the last one's getting three. So now we're going to use that diagram to help us answer those 6 questions. So in letter A, it says angle L is congruent to what angle? So I could look quickly at my diagram for angle L, 3 curve markings. On the other triangle, what has 3 curve markings? So that is angle T. All right, I would ask you to pause your screen and see how many questions you can answer, and then unpause and check your work. All right, so now B is MK congruent to JE. Letter C. Letter C has that little letter M in front of it. Remember, that actually means measure. So I actually want to know the measure of angle E and not the corresponding part. So the measure of angle E is 32 degrees. So we're paying attention to our symbols and our letters. All right, in D, notice we have, I want to highlight it here, we have an equal sign and not a congruent symbol. So here they try to trick us and think that we're matching a part, but they want to know the length. So here this is 6 centimeters. So again, C and D try to trick us. Make sure we're reading that carefully. And then E says here we're going to name the triangle ETJ. If I name it ETJ, I got to match my letters. So what letter comes in what order? Since E has 2 curve markings, we're going to start with K and then travel around L, M. F, we're naming an angle, we're naming JTE. So really we're focusing on T, and we want to continue going in the correct order. So that would be angle MLK. All right, so that's everything on the first page. Make sure you have all that. And we're going to move into some algebraic work with our congruent figures. All right, in our first example in letter A, you can see we have those curve markings, and we're still working with triangles. So we want to figure out the value of x. So there's a couple things. I'm going to highlight my second triangle. So here is x on this triangle, and we have curve markings in these triangles. Remember, curve markings tells us what's congruent. So I know that this angle is 67. I know this angle is 54. So I can create an equation using my pink triangle, or I could do something else. Remember, our triangle is 180 degrees. So we actually have enough information to figure out that third angle. To figure out that third angle, we're going to add up these two angles and subtract from 180. So that would be 180 minus 121, which would be 59. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because I can say that 59 degrees and 4x minus 5 are congruent to each other because they are the third angle in both triangles. So I can say angle W is congruent to angle X. They're the last ones, they would have to be congruent. So I can say 59 equals 4x minus 5. Adding 5 to both sides, and then I'm going to divide by 4, x equals 16. All right, so I'd like you to pause your screen and try letter B, and then unpause and follow along. All right, doing the same thing in letter B, I can figure out that this angle in C is going to be 48 degrees. Again, that is by adding the two angles together, subtracting by 180. Going through all of this, now I know that K and C are going to be congruent. So I can say 48 equals 5x minus 2, 50 equals 5x, x equals 10. All right, so now we're going to go into our next problem here using our congruent figures. So a couple things in this problem is we have our congruency statement, and that's going to help us mark up our diagram. Remember, we have sides and angles. In this case, we have 4 sides and 4 angles. So it's going to get a little messy with marking it up. So I like to use 2 different colors when I can, but that's up to you. So first I'm going to mark angles. So D gets 1 curve marking, E will get 2, F is going to get 3, and G will get 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what I mean by messy. It's covering up some of the stuff, so I try to go very light on it. I'm going to do the same thing in the other diagram. So S gets 1 curve marking, P will get 2, Q gets 3, and Q gets 3, and the last one, R, gets 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and now we're going to go back and we're going to work with our sides. So DE gets 1 tick mark, EF gets 2, FG gets 3, and the last one gets 4. Same thing in the next figure. So we get SP getting 1, PQ getting 2, QR getting 3, and the last one getting 4. All right, so now it says to find the value of X and then find the value of Y. All right, so X we have, and I'm going to find where X is. X is on the inside, so I'm going to highlight that. That is the angle 6y plus X, and that is going to be a little tricky for us. So I'm going to write angle Q, and that is going to be equal to F. So I can't solve for this yet, so I'm going to have to actually go back to it. I'm going to have to go and solve for a different part. So when I thought of x, I looked here first. I should have been looking elsewhere just in case. So I'm going to be looking at the outside. So the outside is I have 2x minus 4, and I have to find the corresponding side, so the one with 3 tick marks, and that is 12. So I'm going to cross this out. So we can't solve that yet. Can't. So I just made a note. We can't solve for two variables. We have to do something first. So in letter A, we're going to say 12 equals 2x minus 4. We're going to add 4 to both sides. So I have 16 equals 2x, making x 8. So then now I can actually go back to angle Q equaling or congruent to angle F, because angle Q is 6y plus x equals 68. Now, how is part A going to be helpful? We are going to plug in our value here. So I have 6y plus 8 equals 68, making 6y equal 60 and y equaling 10. All right, let's go on to the next page. I want you to try this diagram on your own, doing the same process. So mark up your diagram, unpause, check your markings, then repause and try to solve for x and y. All right, so let's go for these markings. So here I have D, E, F, and G, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have Q, M, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to go back and do my sides. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so the first thing I notice is I can't solve for those two variables at the same time again, so I'm going to work with the outside. So I'm going to work with x minus 2, which is the side that has 1 tick mark, which is going to correspond to 8. So I can say 8 equals x minus 2, making x equal 10. The second part, I'm going to solve for y. So I have angle P, and angle P is congruent to angle G. So I'm going to actually write that. So angle P is congruent to angle G. So we have 3x plus 2y equals 84. So I have 3 times 10 because of substitution, plus 2y equals 84. So 30 plus 2y to 84. So 2y equals 54 after subtracting, and y equals 27. All right, so now we're going to move into another rule, another theorem. So here's our third angle theorem. So what this means is if we have two angles of one triangle congruent to two angles of a second triangle, then the third angle must be congruent. So I'm going to show what that looks like. So in this given diagram, if I have 40 and 60 here, and 40 in this triangle and 60 in this triangle, how much is this angle going to be? Right, that angle is going to be 80 because of our triangle sum theorem. How much is this angle going to be? Again, that's 80 again from triangle sum theorem. If I have two triangles and I know both of them have the same measure in two of the angles, the third must be the same. So I can put 3 curve markings here and say they're going to be congruent by the third angle theorem. All right, so we're going to look at a problem that uses the third angle theorem. All right, so it says find the measure of angle BDC. The first thing I want to do is I actually want to highlight my triangle. So I'm going to highlight this triangle here, and I'm actually going to draw it out. In geometry, sometimes our problems do overlap or share parts, so sometimes it's hard to see certain pieces, so I like to sketch them out. So here we have angle A is 45. Then we have down here, this is 30, and that's D, and that's C. I'm now going to draw the other triangle that I didn't highlight. So here is D, C, and B. B is 45. D is not there, and this piece is 30. Okay, so a couple things. How did I know that this letter C in this triangle was 30? Well, here's two curve markings. So I know that angle has to be 30. So again, we're looking for those curve markings. They're super helpful. So since I know that these two angles are 45 and these two angles are 30, these two angles have to be the same. So I can say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that this angle, because that's the angle we're looking for, is going to be congruent to this angle. So how are we going to figure that out? Well, we're going to add our angles up and subtract from 180. And when we do, we have 45 plus 30 equals 75. 180 minus 75 equals 105. So I can say angle BDC, measure of, equals 105. So that was using the third angle theorem to help us. Now we're going to review some of our properties that we have seen before. So it's just a recap. So we have our reflexive property, symmetric, and transitive. I'm just going to put a quick example in each one over here. So our reflexive is when we could say something like AW is congruent to AW. That means that the same side is congruent to the same side. They're sharing that side, or they're the same length. I could even say angle A is congruent to angle A, meaning angle A is the same value. In both the triangles, they both had A. Symmetric, remember that's when we flip. So that's if I have 5 equals x, I could flip and say x equals 5. And transitive is our link, where we link our information together. So I have A equals B, B equals C, A equals C. I linked it by that B. All right, so now moving on to properties of congruent triangles. We want to know if these triangles can be proven to be congruent. That means we need to know if we have 3 pairs of angles that are congruent and 3 pairs of sides that are congruent. All right, so let's look at the first one. So that's A, just cross that one out. All right, so here we have 2 triangles. I already see I have 1 pair of congruent angles. I can mark off another pair. I hope you can see I can mark off this pair right here, and I'm going to write Y. You should be able to identify why you're marking them off, so that is vertical angles. So now I have 2 pairs of the same angles in the triangle. So that means I can mark off the third angle in each, 1, 2, 3. And the reason why I can mark those off is our third angle theorem. So looking at this triangle, I have 3 pairs of congruent angles and 3 pairs of congruent sides by all the tick marks. So I can say triangle DFE is congruent to triangle HFG. If they are congruent, you should be able to write a congruency statement. Remember, order does matter. All right, letter B. So here we have our 3 tick marks. So sides are taken care of, the sides are congruent. Now we're looking for angles. I have 1 pair of congruent angles. I have 2 pairs of congruent angles. So that means the third can get marked off. And I can say they're congruent by the third angle theorem. So again, every marking needs to be justified. So if you're adding a marking, you need to be able to support why you marked it off. So I can say, yes, triangles are congruent. And I can say triangle DFE is congruent to triangle. Remember, order does matter. X, Z, Y. All right. Letter C. Letter C, I see overlapping triangles, so I want to undo that and I want to draw them out. So here I'm going to have M with a curve marking, N with that right angle, and then Q. I'm going to highlight a second triangle. And here I have O with the curve marking, P with the right angle, and then Q. Is there anything I can mark off with these two triangles? And the answer is yes. They share angle Q. Since they share angle Q, they have to be the same measure. So they both will get those curve markings. And if they share it, that means angle Q is congruent to angle Q. The property for that is our reflexive property. Now, are the triangles congruent? Do we have 3 pairs of congruent angles? Yes. But do we have 3 pairs of sides? No. So these are not congruent. All right, the last one. So our last one, we can see we have 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3 pairs. So I already have my angles paired up, done. Now I need to check my sides. I have 1 pair, 2 pairs. Now something special here is that they share this side. So that means BD is the same length in both triangles. So I could actually mark this off. I'm going to write BD is shared. And what that statement would look like, because I marked it off, is BD is congruent to BD. And the reason to support that is our reflexive property. So I can now say that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CDB. Okay, so again, every marking needs to be justified. All right, so we are going to look at a proof together. And then you're going to try some on your own. All right, so it says mark the diagram with the information given. So before I even look at my proof, I always start my diagram and mark it up as much as possible. I even write down some thoughts of how I got what I marked off. So PQ is congruent to CB. So PQ, CB. PR is congruent to RB. So PR gets 2, RB gets 2. It's the second set of information, second pair of congruent sides. Now we have QR, 1, 2, 3, and RC, 1, 2, 3. So you can see we're trying to prove the triangle's congruent. So that means we would need to have 3 pairs of congruent angles now. They're going to give us angle Q and angle C. That's all they gave us. So now the rest that we come up with, we have to be able to support that reasoning. So looking at my diagram, again, not looking at the 2-column proof, the first pair of angles I can see is right in the middle, and those are vertical angles. And then my last pair of angles will get 3 curve markings. And now remember, once we have 2 angles congruent to another 2 in another triangle, the third must be congruent by the third angle theorem. Okay, I'm just abbreviating theorem. So now you can see the flow of this proof. So you can see they took all that given and wrote it for line 1 with given as the reason. Then they're saying angle PRQ is congruent to angle CRB. So PRQ, they're focusing on R and CRB, again, that middle angle. They are telling you that they're congruent and they want to know why. We already have why. They are vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent. Okay. I also like to write the symbols of things whenever we can. So I write angle symbol and the congruent symbol instead of the words. All right. So now The next one, look, it says blank third angle theorem. They want us to name our third angle. Remember, order does matter. But in this case, I'm not going to use 3 letters. I'm going to use 1 because there's only 1 letter here that could easily identify angle P. So angle P is congruent to angle B by the third angle theorem. Because we have 3 pairs of sides and angles, well, of congruent sides and angles, we can prove our triangles are congruent and state their name, that they are congruent to each other, order matters, and then say definition of congruence. And that is your whole proof. All right, so we're going to practice some more. Let me know if you guys have any questions. See you soon.